Escaping his troubled past, Luki, an immigrant in Norway, wasn't just battling the freezing cold, he was up against the brutal prejudices that belittled and mocked him at every turn. Seen as just another asylum seeker, he was dismissed and doubted for his unshakable self-belief. But when his remarkable talent was finally uncovered, even his harshest critics couldn't deny him. Now their lives have been changed forever by the very refugee they tried to ignore. Welcome to our channel. Your support by subscribing would really mean the world to me. Now let me share a true story I heard firsthand, one that left a deep impression on me, and I think it will resonate with you too. Luki Sefu was a 40-year-old Congolese immigrant who found himself in Norway. The road to reach the safety of a European country was challenging, but was made possible with the help of friends and families already living abroad. Unlike many of his friends and family members, it was Luki's escape from war-torn Congo that saved his life. However, living in the extreme cold of Norway for the very first time in his life wasn't as easy or comfortable, though he was safe and didn't go to bed hungry like he used to. Life in Norway hit Luki hard, cold weather and even colder people. As an extrovert who thrived on connection, Luki found Norwegians closed off and indifferent. In his orientation, they claimed it wasn't indifference, just shyness. But to Luki, it felt like walls he couldn't break through. For instance, handshaking was only for people you knew and was to be done when you first met them. Moreover, Luki was told that it was pretty normal for him to be ignored by most people should he get lost and ask for help. The list of the do's and don'ts didn't stop here. He was also told if he greeted strangers, it was likely that he would be ignored. Initially, Luki didn't believe what his instructors told him, but he soon found the truth for himself. Nevertheless, Luki missed home. He missed the conversations he used to have with strangers, the banter and laughter emanating from the bus he used to take to and from his workplace. More than anything else, it was the jolly and happy attitude of his countrymen that he missed the most, and that's why he sometimes wondered if he was better off in his country. At the asylum reception center that Luki shared with many asylum seekers from all over the Third World, Luki found some semblance of stability with the Africans he had met there. There were Ethiopians, Eritreans, Somalis, Afghanis, Iraqis, Syrians, and many others. After Luki's asylum application was accepted, he went through several rounds of interviews, and when he was finally granted asylum, he was moved to another asylum reception center where he would stay until permanent housing was found for him. Meanwhile, he was sent to a language school to learn how to interact and speak like a Norwegian. As far as he was concerned, the Norwegian language was not going to be useful outside Norway. But if he wanted to stay and live in Norway, he had no choice but to learn it. He already spoke fluent English, French, Lingala, and Swahili, and he didn't see the point of learning a new language that was merely confined to the borders of Norway. Life at the asylum reception was difficult. It was lonesome, isolated, and hectic. Every week there were fights over the phone box or the TV, and since most of the asylum seekers like Luki were depressed and worried for loved ones, it was not unusual to see fights between the asylum seekers breaking every once in a while. For example, one of the worst fights he had witnessed was between the Kurds and the Bosnians. Nevertheless, now that he was allowed to work, everywhere Luki went to ask for a job turned him down. Every possible employer required him to speak the Norwegian language as a condition. This frustrated Luki because some of the jobs he applied to were cleaning jobs, and he wondered why he needed to speak fluent Norwegian to be allowed to clean floors. That is why, in his last interview with a cleaning company, Luki asked the manager interviewing him whether it was mandatory in Norway to converse with floors because he didn't see any logic to their ridiculous conditions. The manager shrugged and told him it was company policy. That afternoon, Luki stormed out of the interview because he could no longer trust himself to behave cordially toward the smug Norwegian manager who was interviewing him. "I have a primary school education, a secondary school education, 2 bachelor's degrees, and a master's degree. I was the head designer of a reputable furniture company. I speak 4 languages. I have toured and spoken at design conventions in France, Germany, and New York. My papers have been published in some of the most reputable design journals, so please note that it's not just an asylum seeker standing before you. The least you could do is remove that silly smugness from your face and talk to people like they were people. You do not know me or who I am, and that's fine. I promise you there is nothing special to you, Lukey told the manager, before he stormed off in deep frustration. As soon as Lukey came outside, he had been panting, and he knew he needed to calm himself before his panic attacks kicked in, so when he lit a cigarette, he saw a furniture company, and without thinking, he crossed the road and got into their offices. As soon as Lukey got inside, he forgot where he was, and instead began to analyze the showpieces that were decoratively arranged. The company produced these furniture models years ago, but used them for product staging. As Lukey looked at them, he wasn't impressed. "Excuse me, sir, can I help you?" the receptionist asked Lukey, but he was completely immersed. When Lukey finally responded, he apologized to the receptionist and told her he hadn't seen her. "I am sorry I didn't see you. I am a designer, and I was lost on your display pieces," Lukey told the receptionist, whose name tag showed her name was Marita. Lukey then asked Marita what concept and philosophy the company followed in designing their products. "I am not sure what design concept was followed here. For example, is this piece meant to follow the Bauhaus concept?" Lukey asked Marita. Although she didn't know what to say, she smiled and said she would get someone who could answer his questions. Marita was getting a designer to engage Lukey, and he was already studying a concept stool that impressed him. However, when Marita returned with a designer who introduced himself as Olaf, Lukey asked him all his questions about the design and what the company was trying to achieve. Olaf was very accommodating, but when Lukey told him that most of the designs on display were dull and followed no concept, he questioned who Lukey was and why he was there. "Sorry, we are swamped here. Is there something specific I can help you with?" Olaf asked Lukey, to which Lukey replied that he had come to ask for a job. "I am sorry, but we are not hiring now. Why don't you leave your CV with us, and we will try you when the opportunity arises," Olaf told Lukey. Lukey smiled. He could see right through Olaf, and he was right. Olaf was telling him to get lost without being impolite to the passionate man. "I am a designer. I have no work. Every day I wake up, eat, and go to sleep. I would like to work as a volunteer with no pay. Is there any chance I could help out, just as a favor?" Lukey said. Olaf repeated his previous words, and Lukey, forgetting everything he had been taught at the orientation, patted Olaf's shoulder and quietly said, "All right, man," and then headed off to the door. Unknown to the two men, the office closest to the receptionist was the CEO, a man named Dahl, who heard the whole conversation. Dahl also saw the way Lukey was closely studying the pieces and heard his criticisms, all valid criticism as far as Dahl was concerned, hence why the company was making a loss. Dahl then got out and stopped Lukey from leaving. As Lukey waited, Dahl spoke with Olaf and asked the receptionist to call two people. Dahl and his colleagues then spoke Norwegian to each other, which Lukey didn't understand, though he knew how to say hello and goodbye. After a few minutes, Dahl gestured to Lukey to come closer. When Lukey came closer to the three men and two women, whom he later learned were the company's senior designers, Dahl asked Lukey if he could use the company's waste to create his projects, which Lukey happily accepted. Dahl didn't ask or make anything out of Lukey. He thought he was a bored asylum seeker, and to him it didn't hurt if he came and wasted his time with what was going to be wasted, so he thought it was a win-win arrangement. As far as Dahl was concerned, he was only helping a fellow human being to keep his sanity, but Olaf and the others mocked Dahl's choice and asked him why he did not hire the whole camp full of immigrants as a joke. Lukey sensed that they were mocking him, but didn't make anything of it because how could he? He was grateful for this opportunity, and he wasn't one to look a gift horse in the mouth. Nevertheless, Dahl asked Lukey to come back the following morning. When Lukey returned to the offices as promised, he came with his working permit, copies of his design qualifications, and a file full of some of his previous work. But when Luki handed the file to Dahl accepted it with a smile. When Luki left, he tossed the file into his garbage bin without even looking at it. That morning, it was Olaf who showed around Luki, but what impressed him was when Olaf led him to the basement, where the company produced all their furniture. Olaf then showed Luki the various machines and the wood that was waste. Every day between 3 p.m. and 10 p.m., you can work on your project by using that waste, Olaf told Luki, as he pointed to some wood that was broken and cut into different sizes that indicated they were waste. Olaf then told Luki that he would work at the furthest corner of the workshop. As agreed earlier that morning, Luki started to come in to work at 3 p.m. As everyone who worked at the company was going home by then, Luki selected the pieces of wood waste he would work on. He then started working on a design he had already sketched, and for the next few hours, Luki was busy chiseling, sanding and gluing pieces of wood while machining other parts. The cleaners came and cleaned what they could, and by midnight, his design concept of a simple coffee table, a tray, and 4 coffee chairs was taking shape and coming to life. Without realizing the time, Luki worked on his project, and by 5 a.m. next morning, he was done. All that was left was to paint, so he chose a beautiful brown color. After painting the pieces, he put the newly designed pieces on the work floor and left them to dry. By then, the morning cleaners came and he instructed them not to go near them. That morning, Luki waited until 7 a.m., and when Marita came to work, he told her that he was done for the day, as he had been working through the night. That was his first project. Please ensure no one disturbs the paint. I didn't know where to put my project, so I left it near the machines. They should be dry within the hour, but until then, they should not be disturbed, Luki told Marita, who wrote down what he had said in her notebook. Luki appreciated Marita's professionalism, and when he went out, he went to the nearest cafe, got her coffee and croissant, and then went home to the asylum reception center. That morning, Dahl, Olaf, and the others who were excited to see what the immigrant man had done couldn't contain their disbelief when they walked into the basement floor of their workshop. Dahl didn't even remember Marita's warning about the paint as he looked at the pieces, picked them up, turned them upside down, and felt the final work's flawless lines, curves, and smoothness. Though the painting had already dried up, Dahl and his team were completely lost in their admiration of the pieces, and Dahl, who was stammering, kept repeatedly asking Marita, "Did he do this? How could he do this? It is impossible for anyone to put this work together overnight." Then suddenly, as if he had an epiphany, Dahl ran to his office and looked at his garbage bin. It was empty, but since it was a Wednesday morning and the garbage collection was due on Thursday, he instructed the others to follow him and looked for Luki's file in the garbage container. When Dahl found the file, he started to read it. Dahl was again in disbelief. Luki was a young designer whose work he had come across at a museum in New York a few years ago, and as he looked at Luki's credentials, Dahl was ashamed of himself. That morning he sent his chauffeur to wake Luki and return him to the offices for an emergency meeting. The team had already decided what to do with Luki, and Dahl would not miss out on the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity by working with an acclaimed, talented designer. They couldn't overlook the earth-shattering talent they witnessed, despite the prejudices and mockery they dished out to him at the beginning. Now it was their bottom line that mattered. When Luki was invited to the meeting, it was only to discuss which corner office he wanted, as Dahl had agreed to whatever Luki demanded. Luki settled for a corner office and a very attractive salary. However, as Dahl had made Luki their chief designer, the company gave him a luxury car and a chauffeur. So, while everyone else at the asylum reception center banged their heads with boredom and the depression that came with living life in limbo, Luki was getting a salary that was more than the combined salaries of 5 of the immigration officers. Dahl, Olaf, and the design team came to appreciate Luki's passion and leadership, and for several years, Luki worked for that furniture company, earning them more profit than they had imagined. Although Dahl and Olaf would often talk about their prejudices towards the immigrant man who came to their offices and surprised them, they would often tell their peers, family and friends about the mistake one could make by judging people before getting to know them. As Luki now had something to focus on, the coldness of Norway became more palatable, but every day his heart yearned for his homeland.